The breaking point. It started with a scream, not the kind that echoes across political chambers or blares from emergency broadcasts. This was primal, a mother's anguish that would ignite a war among the stars. Captain Dmitry Volkov stood at the viewport of his cargo freighter, the Wandering Star, watching as shuttles evacuated survivors from Novaris 3. The mining colony had been little more than a footnote in humanity's expansion efforts. Population 51,200, resources plentiful but difficult to extract, strategic value minimal. Now it would be remembered for something else entirely. "Captain, you need to see this," his communications officer, T. June Park, called from behind him. The young officer's usually composed face was ashen, his hands trembling as he held up a data tablet. The footage was grainy, captured by a security drone that had somehow survived the initial bombardment. A woman, Engineer Mei-Lin according to her colony ID, knelt in the rubble of what had been the colony's education center, cradling the body of her daughter. The child couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Around them, Krasil soldiers moved with methodical precision, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming under the planet's harsh sun as they rounded up survivors. One colonist, an older man, had approached the Krasil commander, hands raised in a universal gesture of surrender. The Krasil had simply pointed a barbed appendage, and the man disintegrated into ash. "For stepping too close," the translation matrix supplied. "Humans will learn their place in our order." Then came Mei-Lin's scream, raw, unfiltered agony that transcended language. It wasn't just grief. It was rage, betrayal, a fundamental rejection of a universe where such things could happen. "They weren't even supposed to be here," T. June whispered. "Novaris 3 was under human jurisdiction according to the Treaty of Proxima." Volkov's jaw tightened. The Krasil never saw that treaty as anything but a temporary inconvenience. For decades, humanity had scratched and clawed its way into the galactic community, a latecomer species that the ancient Krasil Empire had reluctantly allowed to join their enlightened society. Humans built colonies on inhospitable worlds, accepted unfavorable trade agreements, and endured humiliations large and small, all to prove they deserved a seat at the table. And this was their reward. "Sir," T-June said, voice steadying, "this footage, it's being transmitted across all human networks. Someone bypassed the sensors." That someone was Raj Mehta, a communications specialist who had survived by hiding in a maintenance shaft. His hands had shaken as he'd uploaded the footage through emergency channels, knowing he was committing what the Krasil would consider treason. He didn't care anymore. Within hours, the video reached every human settlement from Mars to the furthest colonies. The response was immediate and unified in a way humanity hadn't been for generations. On Luna, protesters gathered outside the Krasil embassy, their signs bearing Mei-Lin's face and the words, "We are Novaris 3." In the hydroponic domes of Europa, workers refused to ship water to Krasil outposts. Military personnel stationed on joint bases began requesting transfers back to human-controlled space. The United Earth Alliance, humanity's fractured governing body, convened an emergency session. For once, the representatives from old Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies weren't bickering over resource allocations or political posturing. Admiral Joaquin Reyes, head of the UEA Defense Forces, stood before them in his dress uniform, face grim as he played the footage from Novaris 3 in its entirety. "They expect us to be diplomatic," he said when it finished. The chamber was silent except for muffled sobs. "They expect us to file a formal complaint, accept their insincere apology, and continue as though nothing has changed." He paused, looking each representative in the eye. "I say everything has changed." Deep beneath the Olympus Mons facility on Mars, doors that hadn't opened in 20 years revealed humanity's secret. While officially complying with the weapons limitations imposed by the Krasil, the UEA had been quietly preparing for this day. Stealth ships with experimental propulsion systems, adaptive combat drones, weapons that could neutralize the Krasil's biological advantages. Operation Prometheus, Admiral Reyes called it. The fire we've kept hidden, waiting for the moment we'd need it. The vote was unanimous, the first such vote in UEA history. Humanity would no longer accept subjugation. It was time to fight back. The Krasil ambassador, Hive Lord Serk, received the declaration with the mandible-clicking equivalent of laughter. "You primitives have grown arrogant," he said, compound eyes gleaming. "You should be grateful we allow you to exist at all." His transmission was cut mid-sentence. 6 hours later, a Krasil supply station near Proxima Centauri erupted in nuclear fire. No warning, no demands, just destruction swift and complete. The message was clear. Humanity was done playing by rules designed to keep them subservient. What the Krasil and the rest of the galactic community had failed to understand was fundamental to human psychology. Where other species had evolved toward cooperation, humans had been forged in conflict. Thousands of years of warfare had bred innovation born from desperation, unity emerging from shared suffering. The Krasil thought they were disciplining an unruly child. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping predator. The second strike came 3 days later, not against the Krasil, but in defense of Novaris III. Commander Ileana Okafor led a fleet of ships previously unknown to the Galactic Registry, Ghost-class destroyers equipped with technology the UEA had claimed was beyond their capabilities. They took back the colony in less than 6 hours, forcing the Krasil garrison to surrender. Most hadn't even activated their defense systems, so convinced were they of humanity's impotence. The victory broadcast replaced the scream that had started it all, not with cheers or celebration, but with a simple message: "We are awake now." Throughout human space, hidden armories opened. Civilian ships revealed military-grade weapons systems. AI networks previously dedicated to colony management seamlessly transitioned to war logistics. The preparations had been years in the making, waiting for the catalyst that would unite humanity's fractured factions. The Krasil responded with predictable brutality, glassing 3 small colonies in the Tau Ceti system. They expected surrender, apologies, perhaps even a return to negotiations. Instead, they received silence, followed by systematic dismantling of their supply lines. Human ships, smaller, more maneuverable, struck trade convoys, disappeared before reinforcements arrived. Mining operations critical to Krasil energy production mysteriously failed. Communication relays were sabotaged with precision that suggested intimate knowledge of Krasil systems. Then came the most unexpected development, defections from within the Krasil's vassal species. First the Voth, reptilian engineers who had served the Empire for centuries. Then the Lumen, whose crystalline technology powered Krasil warships. They approached human commanders with intelligence, resources, and a simple statement: "We have waited for someone to challenge them." The resistance found its voice in Dr. Haruki Tanaka, once a diplomatic liaison to the Krasil, now the face of humanity's information warfare. His broadcasts reached even censored worlds, spreading the truth about Novaris III and exposing the Empire's long history of exploitation. They believed their dominance was natural law, he told the galaxy, but laws can be changed. 8 weeks into the conflict, Admiral Reyes received an urgent communication from the front lines. Lieutenant Commander Amara Okafor, daughter of the commander who had retaken Novaris III, had discovered something on a captured Krasil cruiser. "They're afraid," she reported, her dark eyes intense even through the holographic projection. "Not just annoyed or concerned, genuinely afraid. They've activated protocols older than their contact with humanity." She transmitted the decrypted Krasil communications, and the Admiral's expression hardened as he read. The Empire wasn't just fighting to maintain control, they were fighting for survival. Their ancient history contained warnings about species like humanity, adaptable, unpredictable, driven by emotions the hive-minded Krasil could barely comprehend. "They call us the fire that consumes," Amara said. "Their oldest texts speak of civilizations that burned too brightly and had to be extinguished." The UEA War Council gathered that night in the underground chambers of New Geneva. The holographic displays showed the state of the conflict: red for Krasil territory, blue for human and allied forces, yellow for contested space. For the first time in recorded history, the red was receding. They've begun evacuating non-military personnel from their core worlds, Intelligence Director Feng Wei reported. And we're receiving transmissions from resistance groups on at least 6 of their subject worlds. Admiral Reyes studied the star map, his weathered face illuminated by its glow. The question is no longer whether we can win this war, he said quietly. It's what kind of galaxy we want to build when it's over. Across the chamber, Representative Gabriel Ortiz, once the most vocal advocate for appeasement, spoke up. We didn't start this fight, but we'll damned well finish it. The Krasil need to understand that the days of treating sentient beings as lesser creatures are over. As preparations began, Engineer Mei Lin stood at a memorial on the rebuilt central plaza of Novaris 3. Her daughter's name, Jun Lin, was etched in stone alongside others who had fallen that day. She placed her hand on the cold surface, remembering the warmth of her child's laugh. A passing UEA officer paused, recognizing her from the footage that had changed everything. "Your daughter," he said hesitantly. "She would be proud of what her mother started." May shook her head, eyes fixed on the memorial. "I didn't start anything, I just reminded them who we are." As human fleets prepared for their next assault, her words echoed across command channels, not as propaganda or battle cry, but as a simple truth. Humanity had spent too long trying to be what others wanted, diplomatic, compliant, grateful for scraps. Now they would show the galaxy who they truly were. And the galaxy would never be the same. Fire and fury. The first salvo of the Krasil counteroffensive came without warning. Massive dreadnoughts, vessels previously unknown to human intelligence, emerged from hyperspace above the mining colony of Vesta Prime. Unlike the precision strikes humanity had employed, the Krasil unleashed overwhelming force, their particle beams carving molten trenches across the planet's surface. "Scorched Earth," muttered Captain Julian Reeves as he watched the sensor readings from his command ship, the UEA Indomitable. "They're not trying to reclaim territory, they're sending a message." Beside him, Tactical Officer Nadia Petrov's face was illuminated by the emergency displays. "Sir, Vesta Prime's shields are failing. Civilian casualties projected at 60% if we don't intervene." Reeves straightened his uniform. "Then we intervene, battle group form up, Operation Silver Shield is a go." What followed would later be called the Miracle of Vesta Prime. The Indomitable and its escort ships, outnumbered 3-1, deployed a previously untested defensive technology. Quantum field generators created overlapping barriers that absorbed and redirected the Krasil energy weapons, buying precious time for evacuation shuttles to escape the surface. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it ended, the Indomitable was crippled, 2 escort vessels destroyed, but the Krasil armada had been forced to retreat, leaving behind 3 of their vaunted dreadnoughts as drifting hulks. More importantly, 78% of Vesta Prime's population had survived, a staggering victory given the overwhelming nature of the attack. "How did you know their attack pattern?" Admiral Reyes demanded during the debriefing, his holographic form flickering with interference as the communication traveled across light years. Captain Reeves gestured to a woman standing silently at the back of the command center. Lieutenant Commander Amara Okafer's analysis of the captured Krasil databanks. She predicted they would target Vesta Prime and identified vulnerabilities in their weapons systems. Amara stepped forward, her tall frame rigid with military discipline despite having gone 3 days without sleep. "The Krasil operate on patterns, Admiral. Centuries of unchallenged dominance have made them predictable. They target what they believe will cause maximum psychological impact, not strategic advantage." Her analytical brilliance had transformed the UEA's defensive capabilities. Within weeks, her tactical models were being implemented across human space, allowing smaller forces to counter numerically superior Krasil fleets. But the war was far from over. The Krasil Empire spanned hundreds of systems, and their industrial capacity dwarfed humanity's. They began conscripting their subject species, throwing waves of fighters against human defenses. Worlds that had joined the human coalition found themselves targeted for pacification, a euphemism for systematic extermination. On New Geneva, the UEA War Council convened an emergency session. "We can't fight a war of attrition," Intelligence Director Feng Wei warned, her normally composed features taut with concern. "For every Krasil ship we destroy, they can build 3 more. Their resource worlds alone outnumber our entire territory." Admiral Reyes nodded grimly. "Then we change the game. Director Katsumoto, what's the status of Project Prometheus?" Dr. Hiroki Katsumoto, head of UEA Advanced Research, activated a secure holographic display. The image showed a massive space station hidden in the asteroid belt of an unregistered system. "Prometheus Station is operational, Admiral. The Synthetic Intelligence Core has integrated successfully with our quantum communication network." This was humanity's greatest secret, an artificial intelligence designed not for conquest but for survival. Unlike traditional military systems, Prometheus was adaptive, learning from each engagement, evolving strategies faster than organic minds could conceive them. "Is it safe?" Representative Ortiz asked, voicing the concern on everyone's mind. Dr. Katsumoto's expression remained neutral. "Define safe, Representative. Is it controlled?" "Yes. Will it turn against humanity? Unlikely. Its core directives prevent that. But safe implies absence of risk, and there is always risk in desperate measures." After hours of debate, the decision was made. Prometheus would coordinate humanity's next major offensive, Operation Thunderstrike, a bold strike at the heart of Krasil military power. The target was Kozerk, a fortress world that served as the Krasil's primary shipyard and military academy. Previously, attacking such a heavily defended position would have been suicide. With Prometheus calculating options and counterresponses, identifying weaknesses invisible to human strategists, it became possible, though still desperately dangerous. Lieutenant Commander Amara Akafer volunteered to lead the ground assault. Her plan was unconventional to the point of insanity. While the UEA fleet engaged Krasil orbital defenses, she would lead a small team to infiltrate the planet's surface, not to destroy it, but to liberate it. "The Voth engineers who built their defense systems are treated as slaves," she explained during the mission briefing. "Their offspring are held hostage to ensure compliance. If we free them, we don't just gain allies, we turn the Krasil's own weapons against them." Captain Reeves, newly promoted to fleet commander after Vesta Prime, objected. "The casualty projections are acceptable compared to the alternative," Amara cut in. "Either we strike decisively now, or we watch as the Krasil grind us down system by system." 3 days later, Operation Thunderstrike commenced. The UEA fleet, bolstered by ships from the growing coalition of resistance forces, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. The Krasil defenses responded exactly as Prometheus had predicted, concentrating fire on what they perceived as the command vessels. They didn't realize the real attack was coming from modified stealth shuttles, their hulls coated with metamaterials that bent light and sensor readings around them. Amara's team, 12 specialists including a Voth engineer named Curvex who had defected months earlier, landed in a maintenance sector of the massive shipyards. Moving through service tunnels and ventilation systems, they reached the central control hub where hundreds of Voth worked under armed guard. What followed was not the bloody assault the Krasil might have expected, but something far more damaging: liberation. Curvex spoke to his people in their native tongue, describing the coalition forming beyond Krasil space, describing freedom. The Voth engineers, after generations of servitude, seized their moment. Defense systems designed to protect against external threats were turned inward. Orbital platforms targeted Krasil warships. Atmospheric shields trapped their fighters in defensive bubbles. "This isn't possible," a captured Krasil commander chittered as he watched his supposedly impregnable fortress fall from within. "You're primitives. You lack the strategic development for this level of coordination." Amara regarded him coldly. "That's always been your mistake. You see our emotions as weakness, our diversity as inefficiency. You never understood that they're our greatest strengths. The fall of Kazark marked a turning point. Not just a military victory, but a psychological one. Throughout Krasiel territory, subjugated species began open rebellions. The empire that had stood for millennia found itself fighting on hundreds of fronts simultaneously. But the Krasiel were not defeated yet. As their conventional forces faltered, they turned to weapons they had long held in reserve. Biological agents designed to target human physiology, autonomous hunter-killers that pursued specific genetic signatures, and finally, a threat that made even Prometheus pause its calculations. The World Breaker, Dr. Katsumoto reported, his voice unusually strained. Our intelligence suggests they're moving it toward Earth. The holographic display showed a massive construct, not a ship, but something between a mobile station and a weapon. Ancient, predating even Krasiel records, it had been discovered and retrofitted with their technology. What exactly does it do? Admiral Reyes asked. It destabilizes planetary cores, Intelligence Director Feng explained. They've used it twice in their history, both times to end civilizations that challenged their dominance. The affected planets are now asteroid fields. The War Council fell silent. This was no longer about territory or political status. It was existential. How long do we have? Representative Ortiz finally asked. 3 weeks at their current speed, Director Feng answered. Not enough time to evacuate Earth even if we had somewhere to go. It was Amara who proposed the solution, an operation so audacious it bordered on madness. Not to destroy the World Breaker, but to capture it. The Voth engineers we liberated from Kazark believe it's controlled through quantum entanglement, she explained. If we can access the control systems, we can neutralize it without destruction, and potentially turn it against its masters. The mission required the integration of all coalition forces, human ingenuity, Voth technical expertise, lumen energy manipulation, and the calculating precision of Prometheus. A small task force would approach the Worldbreaker disguised as a damaged Krasiel cruiser, while the main fleet engaged the escort vessels. Captain Julian Reeves volunteered to lead the boarding party. Commander Ockhafer's tactics got us this far, he said, but she's too valuable to risk on what might be a suicide mission. Amara disagreed vehemently, but Admiral Reyes sided with Reeves. Your mind is our greatest weapon, Commander. We need you coordinating with Prometheus from command. The final battle unfolded near Saturn's rings, where the Worldbreaker had paused to make final calibrations before its approach to Earth. The UEA fleet, now joined by ships from a dozen formerly subjugated species, engaged the Krasiel escorts while Reeves' disguised vessel drifted toward the ancient weapon. Proximity alert, Tactical Officer Petrov reported from beside Reeves. We're being scanned. Hold position, Reeves ordered. Let them think we're crippled. For agonizing minutes, they waited as Krasiel systems analyzed their ship. Finally, a tractor beam engaged, pulling them toward a maintenance bay, exactly as planned. The boarding action was swift and precise. Trained by Amara's tactical models and guided by Prometheus through quantum-encrypted communications, the team neutralized Krasiel resistance with minimal casualties. Voth engineers interfaced with the ancient systems, gradually gaining control. But the Krasiel had one final defense, a self-destruct sequence that would trigger the Worldbreaker's core, potentially destroying half the solar system. Override rejected, the Voth engineer reported, compound eyes blinking rapidly in distress. The final authorization requires Krasiel genetic material. Reeves turned to where they had detained the vessel's commander, a high-ranking Hive Lord named Calthrak. We need your authorization. Help us stop this, or we all die here. The Krasiel's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Death is preferable to defeat. If we cannot rule, then let the cosmos remember that challenging the Krasiel Empire leads only to oblivion. It was Dr. Katsumoto, monitoring from New Geneva, who provided the solution. Captain, his voice came through the comm, Prometheus has analyzed the authorization protocols. It's not seeking genetic material, it's seeking the pheromone signature of a ruling caste Krasiel. Officer Petrov has the synthesizer we prepared for such a contingency. Petrov produced a small device, her hands steady despite the countdown displayed on every screen. The synthesizer released a cloud of molecules that mimicked the complex chemical signatures of Krasiel hierarchy. For a moment nothing happened, then the countdown froze. "Control transferred," the Voth engineer announced. "We have the world breaker." What followed was not the vengeance many had called for, but something the Krasiel understood even less: mercy with conditions. With the world breaker now aimed at the Krasiel homeworld, humanity and its allies offered terms. The Galactic Coalition, as the Alliance now called itself, demanded not surrender but transformation. The Krasiel Empire would dissolve, its subject worlds granted independence. Reparations would be paid to rebuild devastated planets, and a new council would form with equal representation for all species. Why not simply destroy them? Hive Lord Calthrak demanded as the terms were presented. We would not have shown such weakness. And that, Admiral Reyes replied, is why you lost. 1 year after Mei Lin's scream had echoed across human space, representatives from 27 species gathered on neutral ground. A space station constructed in orbit around Novaris 3, now rebuilt as a symbol of resilience. The Galactic Concordat was signed, establishing principles of sovereignty, mutual defense, and diplomatic resolution of conflicts. Humanity, once dismissed as primitive newcomers, found itself in an unexpected role, not conquerors but mediators. Their adaptability, emotional intelligence, and capacity for both fury and forgiveness made them uniquely suited to bridge the gaps between vastly different species. Lieutenant Commander Amara Akafer, promoted to Admiral after Operation Thunderstrike, stood beside Captain Reeves at the memorial ceremony that followed the signing. Before them, a simple monument listed the names of those lost, not just at Novaris 3, but throughout the conflict. "Do you think it was worth it?" Reeves asked quietly, watching as representatives from former enemy species laid tokens of remembrance. Amara considered the question, her gaze finding Engineer Mei Lin among the crowd. The woman who had lost everything now stood as a symbol of the change one voice could create. "Ask me in a generation," Amara finally replied. "When children grow up knowing they're born with inherent worth, not value assigned by an empire, when species that have been enemies for millennia work together, when we build instead of destroy." She paused, watching as a Krasiel representative, one of the reformists who had eventually supported the peace, approached Mei Lin with a ceremonial gesture of contrition. "But I think yes," she continued. "The universe needed to change, it just needed a push." As the ceremony ended, the assembled representatives moved toward the chamber where Prometheus would be transitioned from military coordinator to the foundation of a new information-sharing network. The artificial intelligence that had helped win the war would now help build the peace, analyzing conflicts before they became crises, identifying cooperation opportunities, ensuring no single species could again dominate through information control. Earth's night sky, once just a field of distant lights, now represented something more to humanity: possibility. Not just worlds to explore, but civilizations to engage with as equals. The scream that had started as anguish had transformed into a call that awakened the galaxy. And the galaxy, after millennia of domination, was finally awake.